correct.
And where's Pioneer?
I'm from the digital world.
The digital world.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us here in the real world. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I love it here.
Well, we love having you, Pioneer.
Please tell me more about the Austrian focus. What are we getting today?
Well, what are we doing? We're going to be taking a look at innovation. Yeah.
Right? Innovation, focusing on entrepreneurship at our Pioneers 19 home here in Austria.
Yes, and we've got a great first panel for you guys. So here to provide insights and developments and information on development and the status of the Austrian startup ecosystem, we have Oliver Holle from Speed Invest, our angel investors Hansi Hansmann and Selma Prodanovic, and Michael Altrichter from Startup 300. And to lead our conversation from De Brugkasten, Dejan Jovicevic. A big round of applause for our first panel.
Hi, thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have a big honor and pleasure, personal pleasure, to host this panel with 4 pioneers of Austrian startup ecosystem. You know them all, they were introduced here. These guys have been, so to say, developing this ecosystem since the early days, and it's really my pleasure to discuss with you the developments in the last, let's say, 10 years. You've been introduced, and we will start with a round of applause and a question for our birthday girl, Grand Dame of our startup ecosystem, Selma Prodanovic. Happy birthday, Selma. Please, a round of applause for you.
Thank you.
Needless to say that you guys are one of the key people of our ecosystem, together with the founders of Pioneers all the way 10 years ago. You started building up this ecosystem, and Selma, exactly 10 years ago, the Incredible Europe event took place. Yeah. Let's say the atomic point of Pioneers of our ecosystem. Can you explain us about that time?
Well, it is. I launched a series of events under the name Incredible Europe, and at this event, it was the first pitching event that Andreas Chas, the co-founder of now Pioneers, has organized. And it is really funny to think about it. It was like, what is a pitch? How do you do that? How does it work? It was really not knowing yet what is to be expected. And then out of that, I mean, he started Start Europe, and then from that it became the Pioneers, the big Pioneers Festival that we see today. But it was really 10 years ago in June, like the first pitching event that was organized, and there was open to public. And it's exciting to sit here with all of you and then this amazing panel just to see what happened out of that. Yeah? It's just really, really the very start of the second round of the startup ecosystem the way we know it today. I mean,
so we'll have a look on the developments. We'll have a look on the learnings that we've gained. We'll have a look on the opportunities that we have lost. And maybe I'll start with all of you, a question on all of you. The key learnings of these past 10 years. How far did we come? Can we be proud of that development? Did we have some assets that we can show to our audience? Whoever wants. Hansi.
When I did my first startup investment in 2010, this is 9 years ago, I mean, there was practically nothing. I think together with Oliver Holle in 2011, we started to invest in startups. There was no competition, that was the good thing. There was nobody else who invested in startups, so we could pick up the best startups we could find. That was very good. If I compare my startup investments from 2010, 11 and 12, were very good, very successful startups. But comparing on a scale from 1 to 10, I would say in 2010, 11 we were at 0, between 0 and 1, and now we are at 3 or 4. That's much, much better, but that's still not good enough. We can be proud of what we have achieved in that time. We would not have imagined 9 years ago where we are now. But also comparing to other countries, to other ecosystems, there is still a lot of room to improve.
Oliver, you're talking with a lot of international partners of yours. Do you mention any of the assets of our ecosystem? Can we be proud, and do we have some learnings that we can show to other countries as well?
I mean, we have one of the best business angels in Europe. I mean, Hansi has been on eye level with the very best investors on the angel in the angel community across Europe. We have a stock-listed startup ecosystem now. We have a seed fund with Speed Invest that is playing also in the top league in Europe. So something happened. At the same time, frankly speaking, if I'm meeting my colleagues in London or Berlin, I'm not talking about Austria, because Austria it's not we are not at the stage where people come to Vienna because it's the next hotspot. It's not. It could have been a few years ago. I think we had the chance. We missed it. Maybe we're coming back to it, but we're not there.
Do you think that we have a story to tell internationally, or do we just have to listen and grow and learn?
I personally think the stories are the founders, and if we don't produce startups that are meaningful for global VCs that really raise rounds of 50, 100 million plus, then we can tell all the wonderful stories about the beauty of Vienna. It doesn't matter. And we have produced too few in comparison to how big the city is and how big the metropolitan area should be. So I think we're actually lagging behind. At the same time, ecosystems take time. I mean, I sold my startup in 2006, so that's like, 4 years before the 10-year period we talked about. That was already the first wave of the startup ecosystem here. These things take time. Silicon Valley took 30, 40 years, and we're just on a path there.
Sam, we wanted to add something.
Yes, on a global scale, of course, and I fully agree with Oliver what just said, but on a global scale, when we look at it, of course, if we compare to Silicon Valley or other ecosystems where it's very developed, we are far behind. But when you look at the global development of entrepreneurial ecosystems, we do have a story to tell for other countries, because we have a lot of lessons learned, and we have done a really fast development compared where we were. As Hansi said, from 0 to 3, but it was really good. And we can help others. I've been traveling around the world and helping governmental organizations or other ecosystem players to build their ecosystems. And we do have a story to tell, and we should be using that.
Michael, first of all, thank you for joining this panel, even though you have infection on your tonsil, so to say. So thank you for coming. Nevertheless, what is your view on that?
So I try to be as soft as I can with my voice. Sorry for that. It's a very interesting discussion. If you think in decades, I started my company, I co-founded it in 2000, so I had the first decade I experienced this market. There were no business angel at all. I didn't even know that this word exists. And the last decade, there was so much progress. And if you only think if we could do in the next decade, the same jump, then we all see a very interesting decade coming up, and we are all the people forming this decade. And I think looking forward, if we can only achieve the same what we did from 2010, the jump from the first decade, 2010, to the last decade, I think we have a tremendous future for us.
Cool. Oliver, you mentioned opportunities that were lost on the way. Let's break this down a little bit. What's your take on that? What kind of things are you thinking about here?
Well, I think the big positive of the last 10 years that Vienna was and still is a very small ecosystem with very few players, and those players luckily had all a very collaborative mindset. So I think we all work together very intensively, and if you compare it to London or Berlin, that's an advantage. It helped us to grow our businesses. There was no clustering, no stupid infighting. So that was a big progress, and it helped the ecosystem. At the same time, in 2011, we started Speedinvest. We were basically the only venture fund around, and we had a 10 million fund. That's basically nothing. Any kind of follow-on round we tried to do was a syndication between a couple of angels, maybe some local government money. At the end of the day, a lot of our companies from the first batch of Speedinvest should have raised much bigger rounds, much earlier, and therefore would have probably been bigger companies by now. So the access to capital was not there. That has changed, at least for us, it's changed dramatically. And that's the opportunity ahead of us, because statistically speaking, given the universities we have, given the talent pool we have, there's no question that the next wave of huge companies will come, and now the capital is here.
Hans and Selma, you guys have co-founded the Austrian Angel Investors Association, and you have a clear idea of what needed to be done, let's say, in the past years. What's your take on the lost opportunities?
I think there are some things that should have been introduced 5, 6, 7 years ago. One of that is a much easier access to talent from non-EU countries. It's still very, very difficult. The road-wide Roskarte does not really work. Other thing is we still do not have a tax incentive system for investors. That's a real problem, and it's nothing that we should invent. I mean, there are other countries showing how it is done, like in UK, the EIS or the SEIS system. It would just be copying this kind of system. And the third important thing is that when we found a startup in Austria, we have to use a GmbH, the Austrian GmbH. That's the worst legal entity you can use, but it's the only we have, more or less. So since many years we are asking for a new legal entity. If these three things we had already, let's say in 2014, 5 years ago, I would bet a lot of money that we would be in a very, very, very much better position now.
Okay. We don't have a unicorn yet, and we are still struggling in the growth financing for scale-ups, so to say. So, given the international competition in this field, how far do you think that we actually really came? Is it fair to say that we are on 4 or 5, or are we still on 1.5 or 2, if we compare, for example, the issues of unicorns and growth financing?
I don't buy that gap on growth capital. Growth capital is always scarce. Growth capital is at the same time a global business. Good global investors look for great companies everywhere. They come to Vienna as well. What we have and what we had is not a capital gap, it's an ambition gap. We had a first generation of founders, just like myself, who were really happy to sell at 60 million, 100 million, 200 million. If you look at the next generation of founders that is now working, they are not happy with that, and that's the ambition level that you have to have if you want to attract 100 to 150 million in capital. You need to build these companies that are much, much bigger and not settle for less. And that was clearly, and for very rational reasons, not the mindset that we had in the last 10 years.
Hansi, is it, let's say, a minus for our ecosystem that we have not produced a unicorn yet, or is it not relevant?
Well, I would add to Oliver, it's a vision gap and it's a lack of enough good founder teams. I mean, Speed Invest is very successful, but not with Austrian companies, with some Austrian companies, but not only. So we have to decide whether we talk about the success of sitting in Austria and being a successful investor. You can do that, but if you just focus on Austrian startups, that's not enough. And the unicorn thing, I personally am not such a big fan of. There has to be a unicorn. There are so many things that have to be at the right time, the right timing, a really good team, a team with a vision, the right funding. The average funding for a unicorn is 300, 400, 500 million euros. I mean, we cannot fund that in Austria. On the other hand, I would say we can have a unicorn because any good founder team with the right product, with the right approach, with the right timing, sitting even in Vienna, in Linz or somewhere else, can be a unicorn because they will get the funding, not from Austria.
But if you're stressing out the success of Speed Invest with foreign startups and the lack of good teams in Austria, let me be provocative a little bit. Do we have too much infrastructure for too little ambition and for too little quality? Michael, Startup 300 is building an ecosystem within an ecosystem. Do we have too much of infrastructure for too little, let's say, ambition?
No, not at all. This was actually the reason for us for building the Startup 300 company, to build a full ecosystem, having all the stakes in one place for events, spaces, and investments and corporates. And I think this is the important source or the important starting point, to have a full ecosystem, a full infrastructure as a company or even as a country to attract money and to attract talents. So first you need a good infrastructure and to build then from there the ecosystem.
One interesting thought, Oliver, and please, you can all feel free to comment on that. You said that at the beginning there was a small core group, so to say, that coordinated things together. It was easier without intrigues. But isn't it inevitable for an ecosystem to grow out of these early, so to say, structures and to open up for new players?
Of course, totally, and that's what's happening. We're all doing our own things now. We see each other much less often, which is a shame. But at the same time, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's also a good thing that these individual initiatives have in its own a critical scale. So that's no problem. And I think we still have a long enough and good enough relationship to keep this collaborative spirit alive, which is a competitive advantage, and we should make sure we don't lose that.
Selma, you preach in many of your speeches the collaboration, but now when you look at the guys, Speed Invest is here, Startup 300 there. At the beginning, they were all one cell, so to say. Now maybe they're competitors on the market when they pitch for the best startups. Do you think that's a good development?
Well, first, it's just normal market development. As also, it has to happen. I mean, I'm happy it is a sign of market development. Basically, at the very beginning, I knew exactly what was happening in Vienna and Austria. Every single event, everything that was happening. Now I have no clue, because there's so much happening, and that's the best that could happen. Yeah? If you want something to develop, that's the best sign. Secondly, I do believe we strongly still work together, and it's not the competition in terms of bad competition, but it's something like, hey, we did this, can you do more, can you do better? But not, I think that it's really something that is very special because we were a group of crazy ones who believed they can create something that did not exist, and we succeeded in pushing that in a positive way. And it's just an advantage to the market, absolutely. And we are still,
the four of you sitting here probably cover 100% of business cases that land somewhere in your portfolios or in your deal flow. So what I was wondering, is it different? Yeah.
But the point is, if we want our startups to grow, none of us can do it alone. We need the ecosystem, we need more investors, we need more cross-border investments, more VCs, and so on. So it's never enough to say, I want my startup. It's about how can we make it grow because everybody profits from that.
What I was going to ask is, as you have the perfect overview of the ecosystem and you get all the business cases, the business plans, do you see any development here? Do we get more professional? What is a seed startup? What has it been? Or what was it in 2013? Oliver, and what is it today? Do they need more money? Do they need more professional mentors? What do they ask for?
So there is a development. At the same time, you have to, our two biggest stars in the portfolio are Austrian, TourRadar and Bitmovin. In the first fund, they are on the way to unicorn level, and so it's not that we don't have amazing startups. In the second fund, we also have a couple of companies that are on their way to that level. So that's looking great. In terms of, I think there is a change in terms of ambition level, in terms of sophistication, how the VC startup path looks like. 8 years ago, you still had to explain how the term sheet looks like. You still had to explain why to take VC money on the next level, how ESOP works, all these things. So that's done. We caught up there. And you do see founders that have this at least clear vision to build something big. So that is positive. But it's the same actually across Europe. I think if we would only look on Austria, we would be pretty much dead in the water.
Cool. We're running out of time, so I'll take one question from the audience. How should the ideal cooperation with universities and startups look like? So the cooperation between universities and startups, maybe they're addressing the topic of spin-offs. Do we produce enough spin-offs? We have a lot of talent at the universities, but the question should maybe be, do we produce a lot of spin-offs, enough spin-offs? Michael, what do you think?
I think a good question. It reflects the overall development. Yes, we have good universities, and each and every university has some startup street or whatever, entrepreneurship avenue, I2C, whatever. So they have their part of getting all this knowledge and the new technologies out of the university. But again, we need here much more pressure, much more strength, and there's a lot more potential. So again, it has been very much done over the past 10 years, but if we only get the same pace what we achieved in the last years, we will see much more startups to be founded.
Broadcasting is part of ecosystem since 2014, and I've been really impressed what has been done. What's ahead of us? What's ahead of us? Thanks to you, we've came quite far, but obviously we shouldn't get satisfied by that. What are the opportunities and challenges ahead?
We're going global. Simple as that. It's, I think it is really, it's no longer the time to look at what we are doing in Austria and also looking at, small gatherings in Europe, but it is startup is a global story, and we need to look at the things more globally, not just we here, but in general, also the startups with ambitions, also the business angels with cross-border investing, the VCs and everything. It's really going global, I think. It's building being part of a global ecosystem, and that's what we are working on.
Hansi.
I think what has not been mentioned enough in this discussion is what we really need to have a successful and good ecosystem is more successful founders. So more exits. We had some exits. We have some 10, 15 founders that have they have money. They invest again. They help other founders. They might found a second time. We need hundreds of them. And then we can be really big, and there can be a real big ecosystem. Without successful founders, it's not possible.
How do we get there?
Many more of them.
How do we get there?
I think we have them. I mean, look at Armin and Kati from Spock, look at the fantastic founders. They will all come back. They will either create their own funds, they will create the next startup, and that's exactly the next generation that we are now looking ahead of us. And in the first fund, we had 19 out of 20 first-time founders. In the second fund, it was already 20% repeat founders, and basically only one team out of Austria that have done it before. So that's a big change, and that will build bigger companies and will build bigger success stories.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm convinced, knowing the development and the players in the ecosystem, that in 10 years, we're going to be sitting here satisfied what we have achieved in the second 10 years. Thank you guys for this time and for the insights. We're over time, so thank you for listening with us, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Oliver Hansi.